The war is over and the Cold War is beginning. And suddenly, everyone is looking over their shoulder for spies. So when a well-dressed man turned up dead on an Adelaide beach with no ID, no wallet, and every label carefully removed from his clothing, naturally people started asking questions.
You said his death looked like poisoning.
However, the toxicology test found absolutely nothing. But then, the police found a book. Inside it was a phone number of a mysterious woman who lived just 400 meters from where his body was found.
Huh? She definitely knows him.
Inside the book, they find 5 lines of letters. It was a secret code.
You're insinuating he is a spy, but in Adelaide?
But Adam, just 300 miles north, was one of the most secretive weapon testing ranges in the Western world. For decades, the Somerton Man looked like one of those mysteries that just would never be solved. Was the Somerton Man a secret spy? Or just a lonely, heartbroken man who lost the desire to go on?
Bloody hell.
Welcome to The Compendium, an assembly of fascinating things, a weekly variety podcast that gives you just enough information to stand your ground at any social gathering.
We explore strange true stories from the worlds of true crime, dark history, scandals, mysteries, and remarkable people.
I'm Kyle Reese, your ringmaster for this week's episode.
And I'm Adam Cox, the Chief Canteen Stew Compliance Auditor for this week.
Stew compliance.
Yeah, I obviously conduct audits on our stew, working out the origins without asking forbidden questions. I look at the ladle sampling. I make sure that the ingredients are all up to scratch. It makes sure the stew is fit for consumption for our audience members.
So we need to make sure that Sue isn't, when she's firing people, that she's like quarantining them to the back room to be turned into stew. That's your job to keep Sue in check, basically.
The animals, once they die in the circus, they get turned into stew.
Oh, okay, so that's allowed. If you die by natural causes, fine.
Not always by natural causes.
Oh, God.
There's a lot of accidents.
That's true, actually. Guys, if you are new to the show and you want to support us, then the absolute best way to support the show and to enjoy exclusive perks is to join us over at Patreon, because signing up will get you access to next week's episode a whole 7 days before anyone else.
And for as little as $5 a month, you can become a fellow freak of the show, which will unlock our entire back catalogue, including our classic episodes.
Every week we say this, we forget to look at what the damn episodes are. Adam, that is your line in the script. It is your job to go through and see what those special episodes are. I can't remember. Guys, let's be honest though, the real reason to sign up as a certified freak and a big top tier member is that you get exclusive access to our compendium keychain. And that is so we can always be there, dangling
near
your
crotch. That was dirtier than normal.
That was something else.
And lastly, guys, please follow us on your favorite podcast app and leave us a review, because your support helps others find us and keeps these amazing stories coming.
Yes, Adam, that's the housekeeping out of the way. We did what we need to do, what the producers insist that we do. But
Did the duties.
did the dirties. Today on the Compendium, Adam, we're diving into an assembly of coded clues, cold beaches, and answers that somehow make everything stranger.
Okay.
Adam, today, our story is taking us back to the year of 1948, a country I think is fair to say we don't pay enough attention to on this podcast. But also, I think it's the country I would say we love the most.
Italy?
No.
Oh,
yeah. I mean, that's a very close second. Yeah, okay, that's number one. So the second best country that we love the most. Let me give you a clue. If America gave us the king of pop, then this country gave us the queen of pop.
Oh, so we're talking about Australia.
Australia, baby! Yes. Adelaide, to be precise, Adam, which we haven't been to. And after researching this episode, who was actually suggested by Robin Linder from Brockville, Ontario in Canada. I think it's fair to say that I'm second guessing whether or not we actually want to visit the city ever, because Adelaide is actually known, Adam, as the city of murders.
Really?
Yeah, over the years, there have been some really unsettling, very gruesome, high-profile killings. For example, between 1979 and 1983, the city was shook by what they called the family murders, where 5 young men were abducted, tortured, sexually assaulted, and murdered by a group known as the family.
I mean, is it actually a family? Because that's a weird Sunday afternoon.
Like, it gives you mob vibes, but when you think like mob in Australia, you can't take them seriously with that adorable accent. Do you know what I mean? So, ooh, you're going to kill me? You're going to stab me? Yeah, no, they have stabbed me and they have killed me. Not only will Australia kill you, the people can kill you too, especially in Adelaide. But also between 1976 and 1979, the Truro murders shook the city, where a couple of guys, Christopher Worrell and James Miller, killed several women and girls, dumping their body around the city. But Adam, more horrifyingly though, the Snowtown murders between 1992 and 1999, when a series of acid-filled barrels started turning up around the outskirts of the city, containing the remains of 11 people targeted as undesirables.
That feels like 3 episodes we should be covering anyway.
It does, doesn't it? This is a perfect excuse to go back to the country we second best love. Now, while today's story isn't a gruesome one, it is probably the most fascinating story I have ever brought to the compendium, with a 70-year-old enduring mystery at the exact heart of it. Now, to set the stage for you, Adam, on the 30th of November 1948, just as the sun was disappearing over Somerton Beach in Adelaide, a couple were taking an evening stroll across the sand when they noticed a man sitting against the seawall. Ordinarily, they wouldn't have thought twice about this, but this man looked out of place. For a start, he wasn't dressed in the 1940s equivalent of billabong broad shorts and thongs, sporting like a surfboard and a mini beachside barbecue next to him.
So if he wasn't wearing that, then what were Australians wearing back then?
I don't know. What was the 1940s kind of beach etiquette attire for Australians? Probably nothing. I mean, Australians are nice to look at, so I hope it was nothing.
Okay.
Basically, Adam, he was dressed in a smart brown suit. He was clean shaven. His hair was neatly combed. For a well put together guy, they thought it strange that he was idly sitting within a small swarm of mosquitoes that were buzzing around him with barely any motivation to just bat them away.
So he's happy to be like, what, bitten?
I don't know. I don't know if he was happy, but I don't think like he had the motivation to just be like, get the fuck out of here.
Okay.
And so as they passed, he did attempt to lift his arm slightly before dropping it back down, almost like a half-arsed greeting, or perhaps, Adam, a call for help. Because the next morning, that same man was found dead in the exact same spot, in the exact same position. And what baffled investigators was that he seemed to be perfectly healthy. And so to simply die like this just felt really suspicious. But the strangest thing was that no matter how hard the police tried, they'd never been able to identify who he was. He didn't have a wallet on him, no personal items that could identify him. And Adam, they just assumed that someone would eventually come forward and report him missing. But Adam, in the years and decades that followed, nobody did. But this didn't stop the police from trying. They did try their best to piece together what they could from the clues that were left behind. But with each new thread, investigators were honestly just left even more baffled than they were before. Because amongst the clues, police had found a scroll embedded, almost hidden inside his pockets. This tiny scrap of paper had a single word printed on it, which led the cops to a mysterious book, which led them to a mysterious woman, which led them to a mysterious code. And so, to the world following this story, this looked like a case of espionage involving an international ring of Cold War spies. Something, Adam, that quite literally feels like it was lifted straight out of an Agatha Christie novel.
That's a lot to take in.
It is. It is such an enduring mystery. But Adam, the point is, for more than 70 years, the mystery has endured, and this man has become known simply as the mysterious Somerton Man.
So he was sitting on the edge of a seawall, and then next day he's dead.
Yeah.
Still on the seawall.
Yeah, same position. He hadn't moved all night.
He wasn't bitten by one of the mosquitoes, was he?
Maybe. I'm sure he was. He is a human, a tasty Australian.
But what I meant was he didn't have an allergic reaction.
Doesn't look like it. He was completely healthy. So I'm assuming you haven't heard of the story before.
No, never.
It is literally one of the most famous Australian stories. I have heard of the story before, but only in that vague way where I knew he was a man who mysteriously turned up dead on an Australian beach. And over the years, a ton of theories have been floated around that range from him being a criminal, perhaps a smuggler from a foreign country. But of course, the most enduring theory was that he was a spy, eliminated with a poison so clever that it left no trace.
Ooh, was it the Russians?
That's what they thought.
Oh, okay.
But also, based on the mysterious woman at the heart of the story, people have theorized that the Somerton Man was just a heartbroken lover who lost the will to carry on.
I mean, it's quite sad, actually.
Yeah, it is. And we'll go into the story and you'll see that possibly that might be true. But the question was, did he kill himself or did he quite literally die from a broken heart? And now we have covered stories like this before. Jennifer Fairgate, for example, who was mysteriously found dead in a hotel room in Oslo. We also have, of course, the episode that we did recently, the body in room 1046, about the man found dead locked inside his hotel room under really bizarre circumstances. And of course, Adam, for decades, just like those cases, this looked like a mystery that would never be solved. And how do we feel about mysteries that don't have a tie-up in the end?
Really disappointed.
It's so disappointing. But Adam, that was until 2022, when basically an amateur researcher with a deep obsession with a story thinks that he might have finally cracked the 70-year-old mystery that has puzzled Australia.
Thinks he cracked it, or did he crack it?
I would say it's almost certain that he cracked it. But this potential cracking of the story is a story within itself. It is just amazing how he did it. And so, Adam, today on the Compendium, I'm going to tell you the story of the Somerton Man.
Okay, I'm ready.
So today we'll look at how this unidentified man on this Adelaide beach became one of the most enduring mysteries of the 20th century, why so many people believe that he may have been a spy, and how modern DNA testing may have finally revealed his name. But also, what I found really interesting about the story, Adam, is that while it's almost certainly solved, the conspiracy theories around the story still refuse to go away. And I think this is something that speaks to our appetite for a mystery. Like, the evidence is there, but people have refused to accept the explanation. And I think it's because the most likely answer in many cases is the most simplest, and people wanted something really extravagant.
I reckon he was bit by something. Literally, that's what I'm calling it right now.
Adam, the story is filled with so many twists.
There can be twists.
Twist after twist after twist.
But if he's like bitten by a snake...
So it's bitten by a mosquito. No, it was bitten by a snake. Oh, what a twist. No, it was a redback spider. Ooh, didn't see that coming.
It was an old lady.
But anyway, Adam, are you ready for this Agatha Christie-esque mystery?
Okay, I've got my inspector's cap on, my McGonagall.
McGonagall?
My McGonagall?
What are you even trying to say?
What's that, like, one-eye glass
Oh,
thing?
monocle!
Yeah, I got my monocle.
You are such a stupid bitch.
And I got my notepad and pen.
Okay, good.
I'm
That's
ready.
all we need. So our story starts on the 30th of November, 1948, when around 7 p.m, a couple were walking along the beach at Somerton Park, just outside Adelaide. And as they walked, they noticed a man sitting propped up against the seawall next to a staircase leading up to the promenade above. He stood out on account of how well he was dressed and presented. He was basically in a smart brown suit. As they passed, the man seemed to raise his arm briefly as if he was like half-heartedly waving back at them. The couple, honestly, they just assumed, Adam, that he was drunk, notably because he was sitting within a small swarm of mosquitoes and didn't really make any attempt to bat them away. I kind of alluded to this in the intro.
Wait, he's not already dead, is he?
No, he's alive.
Okay.
Yeah. And so they kind of giggled to themselves and they carried on. The following morning, though, on the 1st of December, two jockeys were taking their horse out when they too saw the man. He was in the same position as the couple had found him the evening before. But Adam, this time, he gave the jockeys cause to be concerned because he seemed to be staring blankly ahead. His mouth was ajar. From what they could tell, the colour had drained from his face. As they took a closer look, their suspicions were confirmed. Adam, he was dead.
But he's still sitting upright.
He was found with his head up against the seawall.
Okay.
And there was notably an unsmoked cigarette that seemed to have fallen from his mouth onto the lapel of his jacket, which sort of tells you that he had died suddenly and unexpectedly, right?
Mm.
After the cops were called at around mid-morning, the man's body was transported to the Royal Adelaide Hospital, where the coroner determined that he likely died around 2 o'clock that morning. Now, initially, before seeing the man, the coroner assumed that maybe he was just an aged vagabond or a homeless man, perhaps a drunk. But seeing his body, it is very clear that it was the opposite of what he assumed. He was, like I said, well-dressed, clean-shaven. He even had freshly trimmed fingernails. In fact, his shoes, it appeared to have been recently polished, almost to a mirror shine. Not the kind of man you would expect to turn up dead on a beach, right?
No, I don't. Someone with well-cut nails? Absolutely not.
Yeah, exactly. No, you laugh and you say that sarcastically, but it doesn't sound like he was in a fit of depression. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
He was described as looking around maybe his mid-40s, fairly good looking, around 5'11". He had grey eyes and reddish brown hair. However, the thing that stood out the most was that his toes seemed to be bunched up together and his calf muscles appear to be fairly high and pronounced.
What is happening?
Adam, to the coroner, this suggested perhaps that maybe he was someone who was a ballet dancer.
I was going to say, or like wore high heels?
Yes, that's exactly what they said, but I left that out because I thought it took away from the seriousness of it. But the fact that you laughed, now I've said it. But yes.
Wow, so when they stripped him, like, man, that guy's calf muscle.
Yes, exactly. On top of this, Adam, 16 of his teeth were missing.
Oh, that's a lot.
It is a lot, but not because they'd fallen out or been removed. He appeared to have a rare genetic developmental condition known as hypodontia, which is where one or more of your teeth fail to develop properly. Mm-hmm. So it's like from childhood. But this wasn't the only rare genetic trait that he had. He also had an unusual ear structure where the upper hollow of his ear was significantly larger than the lower one. So that's unusual. But both of these were fairly rare genetic traits, with like less than 2% of the population having either one of these. So to have both was very unusual. Now, because he didn't have any ID on him, the coroner figured that this would be the clue to identifying who this man was if no one came forward.
Mm-hmm.
Among the items found on him were 2 travel tickets, 1 used bus ticket stub from Adelaide to Somerton, so coming in, and the other was an unused ticket stub from Adelaide to Henley Beach, which is a nearby town. So it is fair to say that he had no intention of going to Somerton to die if he had plans to move on.
Yeah.
But for someone who was traveling, the lack of any personal luggage, like a change of clothes, money, or even a wallet, this was really baffling to the cops. On his person, though, they did find a few other items. The first was a comb, which appeared to have been made in the USA, but also a pack of juicy fruit gum, again, typical of a brand that you would find in America. So the question was he a tourist? The idea was only reinforced by the jacket that he was wearing, which also seemed to be American. It was unlikely to be imported by an Australian retailer, since it seemed to have been specifically tailored for him, right? Based on the stitching, the way it fitted him.
I see. So he must be a man with some decent money or whatever like that, like well-dressed, can tailor his own suits.
Exactly. However, his haircut and the way that it was styled suggested that he was actually British. Either way, it seemed clear he was a very well-travelled foreigner.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they wondered if maybe his other clothing might have any clues to his identity, because at the time it was very common for people to have their names or initials sewn into their labels of their clothing, which was usually used to identify your items when you're at the laundrette or the dry cleaners, etc. When they checked his clothing, there was evidence that his clothing did have these laundry labels in his clothes, but they'd all been removed. And Adam, removed very carefully, not hacked out, but they were methodically kind of removed with the stitching being very carefully unpicked.
Rather than just like cut it out.
Yeah.
This is what happened with Jennifer Fairgate. Am I right in saying her labels were removed in her clothing?
Also the guy in room 1046, right?
Yeah. And so that is, again, thinking like spies.
Yes, exactly. Another thing they noticed about his clothing was that his trouser pockets appear to have been repaired using a very thick waxed orange coloured thread. Now, after examining the man's body, the coroner tried to determine how he might have died. Initially, he presumed it was a heart attack or some kind of aneurysm that would take him out very quickly, considering on how he was found, right, with the cigarette unsmoked on his lapel. But on final inspection, his heart, Adam, was fine, and his brain showed no sign of hemorrhaging. They then checked his other organs. They did find that he had an enlarged spleen and an excess of blood in his liver, kidneys, and his stomach. Now, to the coroner, this indicated that he might have been poisoned. However, there's no evidence that he'd vomited or convulsed, which would have supported this theory of a poisoning. But still, they ran toxicology tests just to be sure, and when they came back, they were completely negative. In the end, Adam, his death was basically ruled inconclusive.
So is that the only reason you could have that kind of internal bleeding then?
There might be another reason, but they haven't determined it. I mean, the most likely reason for that would be a poisoning. It could be that the poison was undetectable by their tests.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, the way that he died to them was not natural. And so by extension, they didn't believe it was an accident, but it was still a mystery. And this is where one of the avenues into this conspiracy opens up. Because one of the more mysterious things they find among his items was a pack of cigarettes, specifically a brand called Army Club cigarettes. They're very, very cheap. However, the actual cigarettes inside had been replaced with a much more expensive brand of cigarettes called Kensitas. This is unusual because it's usually the other way around, right? People will buy cheap cigarettes and place them into a more expensive box. It's like a status thing, right?
Yeah.
The ladies love it, and the boys are like, check out this guy.
Yeah, but is that again a bit of a red herring because he perhaps just got some other cigarettes and he could fit more into this box?
Possibly. Either way, there was now a dead man, and the investigators needed to try and locate his next of kin. Although, with no ID, the cops decided to publish his photo in the newspaper, hoping that someone might recognize him. But alas, Adam, nobody came forward to conclusively identify him.
Would that be a dead photo of him?
It was his corpse, yeah.
Wow, would they do that? That's the only way to identify him, right? But
yeah, when you Google the Somerton Man, that is the photo that floats around, is his dead body, his bust.
Oh, wow.
Now, Adam, after about a month of no luck, the investigators were more and more convinced that he must have had at least some luggage with him, but perhaps maybe it was lost or stolen. And so they start appealing to anyone who may have noticed any abandoned luggage at maybe some nearby hotels or stations, or anywhere maybe someone might have dropped off a bag. Adam, amazingly, 3 days after this, someone from the Adelaide railway station contacts the cops saying that they had found a dark brown suitcase that had been abandoned in one of their luggage store cupboards. According to the ticket that was attached to the suitcase, it was checked in around about 11 a.m. on the 30th of November, the day before the Somerton Man was found dead on that beach. Inside, investigators find a couple of handkerchiefs, a pair of scissors, a small knife, and some toiletries. But amongst those things, they also find a spool of orange wax thread.
Ah, so this is how they can link it to him?
Exactly. It's the same thread that was used to mend the tear in his pocket. So not only does this prove the suitcase was him, it also reinforced the theory that he was American because the brand of thread could only be bought in America at the time.
Okay, so some of the clues are coming together.
Yes, but they also find something to suggest that he may have been in the Navy because inside his case was a stencil brush. The kind that you would usually use to kind of paint labels on like cargo on a ship.
Right.
So was he a naval officer? Possibly. But they also find something that contradicted this because they also find a set of drafting pencils that are typically used by an engineer. And so who was this man?
It's quite an odd collection of items in the suitcase.
Yeah, very strange, isn't it? Again, the clothes in his suitcase also had their laundry labels removed, methodically removed.
Oh.
Except for 3 items. And on those labels, they all had the same name on them.
What was that?
T. Keane, so Keane. So was this T. Keane? Was that his name? It seems like it. And so the cops check missing person records for anyone by that name. But Adam, when nothing turns up, they decide to extend that search to other countries because there's this insinuation that maybe he might be a foreigner. They extend the search to the UK, Canada, and the US, but again, nothing turns up. So it's weird, it's mysterious, isn't it?
Yeah, like I still find it odd that someone's going through all that sort of trouble to try and mask their identity or remove labels. Like he must be under some kind of operation. It feels like it.
Yeah, it does feel like it, doesn't it? And so by April, the police are basically at a loss. Next, they decide to invite a pathologist from the University of Adelaide to review the case, his autopsy, and of course, the clothes and some of his personal effects. And to everybody's amazement, he finds something. Tucked away inside one of his pockets is a tiny rolled up scrap of paper, almost like a scroll. It's really tightly wrapped up. It was so well hidden and embedded in his trouser pocket, Adam, that the pathologist had to use tiny tweezers to extract it.
How small is this then?
It was maybe about that big, so a couple inches.
Right, okay.
On the scrap of paper were just 2 words, Tamám Shud. It wasn't handwritten. It was printed basically, and it looked like it had been ripped from a page in a book. One of the investigators eventually recognized the language as Persian, and from there, they were able to link it back to a book by a 12th century poet, a guy called Omar Khayyam, titled the Rubaiyat.
How are they able to do that?
Well, it's a very popular book around about that time. If you were into poetry, you would have known this book. As a work, it's a collection of poems that celebrated kind of the good life, like eating, drinking, lovemaking, while not putting too much stock into the hereafter. And the words Tamám Shud that he ripped out of this book are actually the last 2 words of the physical book. Even in translated copies, they're normally left untranslated because it's such an iconic line in this book, and it's probably why someone was able to recognize it. And the words actually, Adam, mean it is finished. And so the way the scrap of paper had been treated, like literally rolled up carefully and tightly, and then seemingly deliberately hidden in his trousers, indicates to the cops that perhaps this was a suicide?
Yeah, it feels that way, right? Like, why
Yeah.
else would he be holding that? Like, is something over and therefore he can now die? I don't know.
Yeah. Now, because of, as we've already said, this kind of spy espionage kind of thread to the story, a lot of people might think that it might be an indicator to maybe his organization that he'd finished his mission.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. But it's so odd that he had tightly rolled that and put it into his trousers.
Very odd, and for it to be so hidden.
Did he want that to be found?
Who knows? But they almost didn't. Adam, eventually 6 months pass. The cops are still no closer to understanding what had happened or who he was. But now they have to literally start thinking about putting this guy to rest. Before they did this, they did decide to have him embalmed in case they ever needed to exhume his body. As well as this, they bring in a guy called Paul Lawson to make a plaster cast of his head and shoulders, just to use basically if anyone came forward to report him missing, and they could then bring out this cast to kind of say, is this him?
How often do they do that kind of thing?
I think it's quite a regular thing that they would do, especially in unidentified cases, because you can't just keep the body on ice.
Yeah, that's smart. I didn't realize they did that.
When that was all done, the Somerton Man was then buried at West Terrace Cemetery in Adelaide on the 14th of June 1949. And his tombstone basically read, Adam, "Here lies the unknown man who was found at Somerton Beach." It is really sad, isn't it? It is a sad case, regardless of how you look at it. This guy who's just been found randomly dead on this beach.
Yeah, and like, especially if he's from America, like, does his family know?
Exactly.
All this sort of stuff.
Yeah, it is so sad. And so the cops keep quietly working in the background. They start to wonder if they might be able to track down the actual book that the piece of paper was actually torn from. They send out another public plea. The cops also call around all the local libraries to check their copies of the Rubaiyat to see maybe if the final word of the book had actually been torn out. Adam, a month later, in July 1949, a man who the cops refer to as Ronald walks into the Adelaide police station to report that he, in fact, had the exact copy of the Rubaiyat that the cops were looking for.
What are the chances of that?
Yeah, it is wild.
It feels like, I don't know, if I was the police, I was thinking, what are the chances of actually solving this? And they obviously do all this work to try and do that. But I would be like, they must not be expecting much in return.
I don't think so, but I think with every new clue that comes, they get more determined to go, what's next? Like, where does this lead? Now, apparently, the day before the Somerton Man was found, Ronald had actually parked his car up on Moseley Street while visiting Somerton Beach. He remembers it being super hot that day because he deliberately left his windows down to stop the car from getting too hot. When he came back, the book was on his car seat. Someone had basically just thrown it through the window. He keeps the book. He doesn't think twice about it until he reads the update in the paper, and then he remembered that he had it. When the cops flipped to the last page had been torn out, and the scrap of paper perfectly matched the tear. It was the same book.
So we're thinking that the Somerton Man ripped that out, threw it into the car before he then went to kill himself.
Kill himself or
before
die.
he died. Yeah,
we don't know. But they do also notice something very unusual, because written in pencil in the book was a telephone number belonging to a nurse who lived 400 meters away from where the Somerton Man was found dead.
Okay.
At the time, the cops didn't reveal the woman's name, only referring to her as Justin. So Justin with an E and a Y.
Why that name?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's not her real name. She specifically requested the cops to keep her name out of this.
Oh, but why would she do that?
Exactly. At the time, she had a young son, around about 1 year old. Literally, the cops suspected that maybe she and the Somerton Man might have been involved romantically. Possibly her 1-year-old son was the mysterious Somerton Man's, right? She's asked to come down to the station where they show her the plaster cast. Adam, she's visibly shaken. One of the police officers later commented that she was so completely taken aback to the point of giving the appearance that she was about to faint.
I don't know what accent that was.
An Australian accent.
I know you tried.
That's fine. Should I say it more seriously, or should we keep that
It was
in?
very nasally.
I've got a cold. I've got a sinus issue this week. Sorry, Australians. But drawing it back to a more serious note, like, she completely denies knowing who he was, right? And the cops, however, based on her initial reaction, they do not buy this, especially when she refuses to look at the bust anymore. But the question is, Adam, if she didn't know him, then how on earth did her phone number get inside that book?
Yeah, someone's written that down. And if she's refusing to look at him, that's just strange.
It sounds so bizarre, doesn't it?
Because you'd go like, oh, I don't know that person, or I do know that person.
The cops, they keep pressing her. Eventually, she confesses that the Rubaiyat was actually her favorite book. And she tells the cops that during the war, she had given a copy of that same book to a man that she had met while she was working as a nurse in Sydney. His name was Lieutenant Alfred Boxall of the Australian Army.
Okay.
So she doesn't elaborate on what their relationship was, but the cops think that maybe he was an old flame and that this was the Somerton Man.
Yeah.
But when the cops look into Alfred Boxall, they find him both alive and well.
And a different person.
On top of that, he still had the original copy of the Rubaiyat that Jeston had given him.
Oh.
The final page, of course, was still intact, but also Jeston had signed her name on the front page along with a handwritten line of poetry in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the cops, this was just another dead end. But for some reason, the cops couldn't shake this idea that she didn't know the Somerton Man, especially considering her reaction after seeing the bust.
Yeah, it's a bit odd, right? She seems suspicious. And it's odd that she had a copy of that book where she gave it to someone else.
And she was very shaky about it. But also remember, her number was in the book, and she also lived 400 meters from where this guy was found.
And she can't explain what any of that is about.
No. So it couldn't just be a coincidence.
Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why drivers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that works better for you and your family, they make it easy to see your options. Visit Progressive.com. Find a rate that works for you with the Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
So following this, the cops noticed that inside the Rubaiyat was something else. It had originally been written in pencil, and it had either faded or someone had tried to rub it out. And so to determine what it said, they sent it off to be analysed. They are able to make out that it contained 5 rows of uppercase letters with some of those letters being crossed out. It was a code.
Ah, I see. So it's not anything that they could easily decipher. It's not a sentence or anything like that.
No.
It's a bunch of letters.
That's right. And so they really want to crack it. And so they send the book off to the Naval Intelligence team to see if they can crack it. Again, they also appeal to the public. On top of this, they recruit students, journalists, teachers, mathematicians, even amateur code breakers. And Adam, in the end, not a single person is able to solve this code.
Maybe it's just a word search.
It could be. That's what I thought. Was someone maybe doing the crossword in the Sunday paper or whatever, and they're writing down some kind of letters just to kind of see if they can rule out some certain things?
But why would it be in this book?
Because it was to hand. Do you know what I mean? Often on a Sunday afternoon, you've got your paper, you've got your books. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but you'd do that, you'd doodle on the newspaper. You wouldn't doodle in a separate book.
But for some reason, I think that it could just be as benign as being that potential solutions for a crossword.
Who would write in a book that isn't to someone or anything like that?
Well, I mean, books are journeys, aren't they? You write down notes in them, you put your thoughts down in them, you dedicate them to people.
Not if it's someone else's work. You just don't just doodle in their book.
Fine, we can argue about this another time. We disagree. But either way, no one can solve this code. They have no idea what it might be. And so, Adam, eventually 10 years go by and the cops eventually give up. They stop working on this case. And at the time, this story was literally everywhere. The cops had shared a fair amount with the public, being very careful not to obviously name any names like Jeston and Roland just to protect their identities. It was normally at their request. But the public were really enthralled with the story. And so it was really frustrating that nobody managed to crack this code. And so naturally, with so much interest and no answers, all sorts of theories start swirling around.
Right, okay.
Probably the most prominent theory was that espionage was at the center of it all. Remember, it wasn't long since World War II had ended. After this, of course, we know the world sort of entered into the Cold War, which resulted in the USA establishing various counterintelligence programs across the world in a project known as the Venona Project. This, of course, included intelligence networks being set up across Australia. And it's actually through this project that the Americans helped set up that Australian actually uncovered that the Australian Communist Party, which had previously been banned in the 1940s, was still operating, but operating underground. And even worse, Adam, they had managed to infiltrate the government and were funneling classified information back to the Soviet Union.
Oh, really?
It's through this project that Australia was able to actually crack this. And so it was this gross act of espionage that made it critical for Australia to establish their security intelligence organization. Like America calls it the CIA, we call ours MI6, Australia calls theirs the ASIO. And basically, it's to track down spies and Soviet agents operating within the country.
I see.
So by the time this mystery of the Somerton Man was doing the rounds, speculation leaned into this idea that the Somerton Man was probably likely a spy based on this. And it sort of fits in this Agatha Christie sort of way. Do you know what I mean?
I feel at the moment it feels that way, but I'm getting the sense that you're going to pull the rug and actually it's something completely different.
Well, there's a lot of twists in the story and it's quite winding. I love it so much. But also the other elements that kind of feed into this idea that it might be espionage is that it seems like this guy went to some effort to hide his identity by meticulously cutting out his labels, right? He also seemed to have been a foreigner, likely American. Was he an American agent? Perhaps a British agent on account of his haircut? Also, the strange torn out page from the Rubaiyat and the 5 rows of letters felt all like a coded message. And of course, don't forget, Jeston, who seemed to be really shaken by the sight of him. Why, Adam? Those are the questions that people wanted to know. And so as a natural theory, it did feel very plausible. And even to us today, right? Like I can understand like back in the 1940s when it was the climate of espionage and the Cold War and stuff, you would lean into that. But even to us today, it feels very much like that.
Yeah, maybe it's because of some of the other stories that we've covered. It kind of, there's some similarities there. But yeah, I'm getting the sense he's not going to be a spy. So if he is a secret agent or spy from America or the UK, what's he doing in Adelaide?
Adelaide of all places, I know, right? Well, at the time, it wouldn't have actually been strange to find a secret agent there because 300 miles north of Adelaide was a joint air force complex between Australia and the United Kingdom called Woomera. At the time, it was literally, Adam, the largest land-based test range amongst Western Allied countries. It's huge. The complex itself was incredibly secretive, and it's because they were testing weapons like missiles, rockets, and eventually nuclear weapons.
Is this before Area 51?
I think it's around about the same time, but this area was huge. And so for Cold War espionage activity, if anything, Adelaide was primed for spying activity. The insinuation here was that if the Somerton Man was a spy, maybe his death was a way to dispose him, right? Maybe he had served his purpose or that he had done something bad, perhaps. Maybe he had defected and was maybe starting to work for the Soviets. But it is also possible he was a Soviet mole who wanted to defect, and so they killed him before he could potentially escape.
So he's like a double agent.
Yeah. We touched on this earlier, but remember how the coroner thought that maybe he might have been poisoned? There was the strange situation where they found that unsmoked cigarette on his lapel and discovered that he had cheap cigarettes with him, but inside they had been replaced with more expensive ones. Like we said, it's not unusual to put cheap cigarettes in a more expensive packet for like status or whatever, but the situation is completely the opposite. Was someone sent to exterminate him? And did they poison him with poisoned cigarettes? That's the question that we kind of want to explore here.
They must have tested the cigarettes though, right?
The toxicology report didn't find any poison in his system, but indicators like the large spleen and blood in his organs were typical markers of poison. And again, we are dealing with Cold War governments at this point. And so was the poison potentially undetectable? We know today, of course, that the Russians have a knack for poisoning their adversaries, right? Like just back in 2018, both Sergei and his daughter, I think it's Yulia Skripal, were poisoned by the KGB in Salisbury, here in the UK. Sergei was a former Russian military intelligence officer who'd been spying on Russia on, I think, like behalf of MI6. When this was discovered, the KGB targeted them both with a nerve agent called Novichok. Do you know how they poisoned them? Do you remember this?
I know the incident, and I know the Russians denied it, and then eventually, I'm sure recently they were like, no, it definitely was the Russians. But I can't remember how the poison was transferred.
Amazingly, because you only need the tiniest amount. They had someone to walk down their street, walk up to the door to pretend to be delivering something, and then with a handkerchief smear it on the door handle.
Wow.
And then when, of course, they got home or they left the house, they touched the door handle, they were then infected. And then would only be a few hours before they essentially collapsed.
That's horrendous, isn't it?
Crazy. And remember, the Americans aren't above this either, because during the Cold War, the CIA famously toyed with the idea of assassinating Fidel Castro by poisoning his cigars. And so the theory is really not that far-fetched. So back in the Somerton Man's timeline, a few options were floated around of what the poison might have been. And after speaking to a few experts, they pointed the finger at a substance called strophathin, which some indigenous tribes in West Africa actually use to make poison arrows. You only need a minuscule amount for it to kill you. And because of its rare nature, Western pathology wouldn't have factored its markers into their toxicology tests. And so the question is, was his cigarettes laced with something very similar? But if that is true, Adam, the question is, what did Jestin and the Rubaiyat have to do with all of this?
That, I don't know.
It's so weird, isn't it? What is the situation in the story? Well, we do now have a possible answer to this, because in 2014, a British detective named Gordon Kramer decided to take a look at the copy of the original Rubaiyat, the coded message, right? Inside the pencil lines are some of the letters. He thought that he could make out some interesting markings. He sent it off to be analysed under UV light, and sure enough, within the strokes of the larger letters was micro-writing.
Hang on a minute. So people have been looking at this book. So it's the exact same book that he's been able to send off. So people have been looking at this throughout the years. And it's only about 50, 60 odd years later that someone's able to see this minuscule writing.
Yeah, and it's within the strokes of the actual letters themselves. It's so tiny.
How did they even do that?
Who knows?
That's spy stuff.
It is. And basically they work out that it spelled out the word venom X4621.
So that's a poison, yeah?
No. Sounds like gibberish, sounds like a poison. Turns out that it was the name of a British fighter jet developed in the late 1940s and was being tested at the Woomera Air Force Base, just 300 miles north of Adelaide. Here's the kicker. He also decided to examine the copy of the Rubaiyat that Jestin had given to Alfred Boxall.
Oh, yeah.
That one contained, remember, a handwritten note from Jestin to Alfred, right? It too contained micro-writing within the large letters, although they were unable to pinpoint exactly what it said, but they could definitely see telltale markers of micro-writing within those letters as well.
I'm still trying to picture what that looks like.
So if you look at that Q letter, you can see there's some very clear markings that look like writing inside the stroke of the Q.
Oh, wow. Like, yeah, on first glance, you would just think it's like the graphite not touching the paper properly, right?
Yes.
It's just kind of a bit sketchy. And I guess they're only able to identify this with technology that's, I guess, been developed since the 40s.
They were using a UV light, as far as I'm aware.
Wow, but yeah, you can make out tiny little letters. How do you even write that small, though?
Exactly. That's crazy, isn't it?
So this Justine lady, she must be somehow connected to the spy world.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And so for Gordon Kramer, he believes that this was evidence of some sort of spying ring involving Alfred, Justine, and the Somerton Man, potentially sending coded messages hidden within his books about what was being tested at that airbase.
Yes.
It's so plain for us to see, right?
Now, in hindsight, it's obvious.
But if that is true, there is just too much of a coincidence for the Somerton Man to have this copy of the Rubaiyat with Justine's number in it, and for it to contain a cryptic clue, and for the copy of Justine's Rubaiyat that she gave to Alfred, a lieutenant in the army, to also contain evidence of micro-writing, even though they were unable to establish exactly what it said. In 2013, so this was a year before Gordon Kramer discovered the micro-writing in both books, probably the thing that spurred him to look closer at these books, Justine's adult daughter, a woman called Kate, said in an interview that her mother could speak Russian.
Oh, okay.
And according to Kate, Justine admitted that she had lied to the police about the Somerton Man, but she then refused to tell her daughter anything more on the subject. So it sounds very suspicious and very ominous, doesn't it?
So she's a double agent.
It sounds like that's what this is getting at. Now, I don't know if I believe Justin's daughter Kate is saying, because a little bit more is going to come before this happens. And so it makes me wonder whether or not she's just trying to jump in onto the story and capitalize on it a bit, because at this point, Justin is dead.
Oh, okay. So she's trying to jimmy herself into this history.
Possibly. I'm not saying she is. But Adam, what do you think in this story so far?
Well, I'm back to thinking it's spies because of the tiny micro writing. Otherwise, it's just some weird, I don't know, or an affair. But it feels like there's something dodgy going on.
It does, doesn't it? Adam, our story needs a resolution, doesn't it?
It does, Kyle.
And it just so happens that we have one.
Okay.
And honestly, for me, this is just as fascinating as the mystery at the story of the Somerton Man. And it all starts with a guy called Derek Abbott, who first heard about the Somerton Man in 1995. And at the time, Derek was working as an electrical engineer professor at the Adelaide University. And ever since, he's been really intrigued by the story. But in 2007, when revisiting the story, he's really surprised to discover that the strange coded message had never been cracked. This is not to suggest that Derek is under any illusion and that he thinks that he can be the one to crack it. Like, they literally got some of the best code breakers in the world who tried and failed. But he thinks that maybe people are being too hung up on the code rather than exploring other avenues. For him, he felt like the answer might lie in who Justine actually was.
Well, yeah, clearly she's got something to do with this.
Yes, and remember, Justine wasn't her real name, and people often forgot that. At the time, and at her request, she had asked police to keep her name anonymous, which the police respected.
But equally, that's odd in itself because at the moment, they're not saying that she's the criminal or connected to the murder.
You could argue that, but at the same time, remember Ronald, who actually found the Rubaiyat in his car, he also requested that his name not appear in the papers as well. It might be in the case files, just not in the public stuff when they were appealing to the public.
Sure.
So basically, Derek sets out to find out who she was. He manages to track down the detective who works on the original case, a guy called Jerry Filtus. And by a stroke of luck, Adam, this guy remembers her name, and her name was Jessica Thomson. Now, sadly, Derek tried to track her down, but then that's when he discovered that she was dead. So this was like in 2007, a few years before Kate came out and said that her mother could speak Russian. But through her relatives, in particular, Jessica's daughter, Kate, he was able to find out a bit more about her background. He discovered that in the late 1940s, Jessica was dating a man called Prosper Thompson. And in 1947, Jessica had given birth to a baby boy that she called Robin. She had always maintained that Prosper was Robin's father. But Derek had a theory based on how shaken up Jessica was after seeing the Somerton Man's plaster bust, and the fact that he was found 400 meters from her house, and that her number was in the book, that maybe Prosper wasn't Robin's father.
Yeah.
Maybe Robin's father was the Somerton Man, right? And so Derek asked Jessica's relatives if they had any photos of Robin. Straight away, several things stand out. Remember I mentioned that the coroner described the Somerton Man as having this unusual ear structure where the upper hollow was significantly larger than the lower hollow.
Uh-huh.
Well, this is basically genetic, and it affects roughly 2% of people. On top of that, the Somerton Man also had something called hypodontia, where one or more of the teeth fail to develop properly. Again, another rare genetic trait. So these are rare, right? But super rare to have them together.
So I guess you're about to tell me that Robin, the kid, had both of these traits.
Robin Thompson had both of these genetic traits.
Wow.
But there was something else. The coroner also noted how the Somerton Man had very high calf muscles that were particularly pronounced,
Yep.
which he then deduced that he was likely a ballet dancer.
That's not another genetic thing, is it?
Well, turns out that Robin was a professional ballet dancer at the Australian Ballet Company. So people say this could be just a coincidence, but being a ballet dancer doesn't give you high calf muscles. The fact that you have a genetic advantage of having high calf muscles means that you could be great as a ballet dancer. It's the same with swimming. Elite swimmers don't develop long torsos, arms, and flexible joints. They start with a genetic advantage, which allows them to optimize for hydrodynamics in speed and buoyancy in the water, right? So this is not to say that the Somerton Man was a ballet dancer, but he certainly had the physicality to be one if he wanted to be.
I see.
So it seems like, based on this, there was definitely a connection between Jessica and the Somerton Man, right?
Yes, if she didn't want to look at his bust because I guess, yeah, her secret would be out, right?
That
So
she was like, maybe they were being agents together, but then they also bore a child together.
Yeah. And
Who
also
knows?
perhaps she was visibly upset because she loved him or
Yeah.
at one point in time.
Mm-hmm. She was also involved with Prosper at the time. So was she then having an affair? Was she like thinking, if they find out that actually the Somerton Man is Robin's father, will Prosper still want to marry me?
But the fact that she didn't want to look at the bust makes me feel like, yeah, she did want people to find out that their relationship, and she was actually pretty upset that he had perhaps died.
Could be all those things. So it seems like at this point, it's very likely that Jessica knew the Somerton Man's real name and that she likely had a son with him.
Mm-hmm.
So while Robin was working as a ballet dancer for the Australian Ballet Company, he actually met a woman called Roma, and eventually she fell pregnant and gave birth to a daughter that they named Rachel Egan. Sadly, Robin and Roma, they decided to put Rachel up for adoption. And so she never really knew her parents growing up. One day, when Rachel was at university, she received a call from her social worker telling her that her biological mother, Roma, had made contact and she wanted to know if she was willing to meet her. Rachel, of course, she agrees. They meet, they get super close. And after a few years, Rachel decided to move to Brisbane to be near Roma, to kind of develop that relationship. And finally, connecting with Roma and finding out about her father, Robin, she finally understood why, throughout her life, she was always drawn to the arts, particularly ballet.
Did she have high calf muscles as well?
She did. So yeah, it's a genetic thing that was passed down.
What about the ear thing and the teeth?
Doesn't seem that she had those, but it's certainly something that people want to know. So a few years after this, Rachel gets another surprise when she receives a letter from Derek Abbott telling her that he believed that she may have played a part in one of the most enduring mysteries in Australian history. Rachel knew, of course, the story of the Somerton Man very well. So it's a really massive shock when Derek tells her that he might actually be her grandfather and asks whether or not she was willing to provide a DNA sample so that they could basically put to rest the 70-year-old mystery. Rachel agrees to meet Derek in Brisbane. When she talks about this moment, the thing that stands out is that Derek is very interested in her ears and her teeth.
So when he meets her, he just can't stop looking inside her mouth and around her ears.
Now, manosphere boys, be on alert because this might be a tactic to get a chick in bed because she is so flattered by this. They get on so well that by the end of that very same day, Derek proposes to Rachel and she says yes.
What?
I know! I know! She's like, oh, you really like my ears.
What?
Yeah, they hit it off and they get engaged at the end of that day.
But they've spent like 8 hours with each other, max, or something.
I know. Isn't that just crazy?
Wow. But they say that you can fall in love at first sight.
Yeah, they do. That's clearly what's happened here. And I think they finally get married in like 2010. They are still married today. As far as I can tell, they have 3 kids together.
Wow.
But of course, the mystery of whether or not Rachel was related to the Somerton Man was still on the agenda. In fact, Rachel jokes years later that Derek only married her for her DNA.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Which, in a sort of way, that is exactly why people get married.
Yeah, that's true. And he wants to be connected to the Somerton case.
Yeah, so like he's been doing this for 15 years, so he's really invested, right?
Yeah.
But the issue was that even though Rachel agreed to give a DNA sample so they could finally put the story to rest, the problem was getting a DNA sample from the Somerton Man himself. Because over the years, Derek had petitioned numerous times to have the Somerton Man exhumed, but every single time the local government had always said no. And so, by complete chance, in 2015, while inspecting the Somerton Man's plaster cast, he noticed that there were hairs still embedded in the plaster cast. However, when he went to go have these tested, there wasn't enough DNA material to produce a conclusive result. And so, in that moment, Adam, it felt like he'd married Rachel for absolutely nothing.
Well, I'm sure they fell in love.
I don't believe so. To get married after like 8 hours or get engaged after 8 hours, I think he had an agenda. He was just like, if I marry her, I have a legal right to a DNA. And so like, he's like, damn it, did it all for nothing. But no, you are right. They did marry for love.
But I don't think this is going to stop him or deter him. He's going to find a way.
But at this moment in time, it felt like there was now no chance of getting to the bottom of this mystery. And so he's had to start grappling with this idea and coming to terms with that fact. But of course, Adam, as if the story didn't have enough twists, I'm going to throw another one in there for you. Because in 2021, the Australian government changed their mind and they launched a new national program in an effort to put names to unidentified remains across the country, which means that the Somerton Man can now finally be exhumed.
So they now agreed to it. Because how many cases are they trying to solve then?
A lot. But the issue was that back in the 1940s, the decision was made to deliberately embalm the Somerton Man, right? The idea was that maybe someone will come forward, they can exhume him, they can identify him if they ever needed to. This basically meant that destroyed much of the kind of the usable DNA in his body.
Oh, does embalming do that?
Yeah, after quite a long time. And this is something that Derek never really considered. Like, he's been pushing to get them to exhume the body, but he was like, oh, they embalmed him.
So there's no way, like, inside his bones or the...
Possibly, yes. So they were going to try, but all he could do at this moment in time was just hope and wait.
Sure.
But at the same time, this was also now in the hands of the Australian government. He had put in so much time and effort over the last 15 years. He had gotten this far. He felt that if the results did come back and Rachel was related to the Somerton Man, all the glory was going to go to the Australian government. And he just did not want that.
So he did marry Rachel for her DNA.
Basically, he wanted to be the person to identify the Somerton Man, right? In a weird way, yes, he married her, but in a way this kind of connects them even closer together because he was the one to be able to solve their family mystery now.
Yeah, that's true.
And so by 2022, Derek reached out to a woman called Colleen Fitzpatrick. She's a forensic scientist who previously worked at NASA. She ran a DNA John and Jane Doe project, which works to identify unknown human remains using forensic genetic genealogy. Basically, you would put DNA profiles of unidentified people through various open source DNA platforms to see if you can link to any of their identities. And so Derek decides to send Colleen one of the hair samples that he had gotten from the plaster cast. He knows, of course, that there's probably not enough genetic material, but maybe the technology has advanced enough over the years that they might be able to get something. She does. And Colleen was able to extract enough material to get a usable DNA profile. Adam, we have the results.
Okay. I feel like we need a drum roll.
Do you think? Shall I put one in? I'll put one in post. Adam, the results showed that Rachel was not related to the Somerton Man.
It feels like a game show. But how is that possible, considering everything else that's happened? Like, with Rachel?
The genetic markers, right? The affinity for ballet. Like, was this all just an incredible coincidence? He had three, basically. The legs, the ears, and the teeth, which I think are actually three very important things when looking for a man. Legs, ears, and teeth. And what are the chances of having someone else 400 meters away having that same genetic markers?
So that is just a weird coincidence.
Yeah. But Adam, this is not to say that they didn't find a match to someone else.
Okay.
Because there was a DNA sample in the database that almost perfectly matched to a relative of the actual Somerton Man. The Somerton Man's actual name was...
Oh, was it like was it T. Keane?
No, it was Carl Charles Webb.
Who's that?
Exactly. He was basically reported missing 19 months before the Somerton Man's body was found in 1948.
Okay, so the Somerton Man is this Charles Webb dude. Then what about, who was the guy, the name in the Somerton's labels?
Yeah, why is he walking around with some other guy's clothes?
Yeah.
Well, we do know that too, because T. Keane was Carl Charles Webb's brother-in-law. So his clothes, they were likely hand-me-downs.
Okay, so that explains his clothing. Then who is still Charles Webb?
Well, when Derek connects to this Carl Webb guy's living relatives, they make it very clear that he wasn't this international man of mystery that we thought he was. He was literally just a regular engineer. He was born in 1905, which would have made him 43 at the time of his death. Adam, he was from Melbourne.
Oh, so he's Australian this whole time?
Yes.
With a British haircut.
In 1941, about 7 years before he was found dead, he married a woman called Dorothy Robertson. The fairy tale very quickly fell apart and he started being very abusive. He also seems to have suffered from like a chronic depression. Dorothy describing him as being obviously abusive and a loner. It was at this point that she came home one day to find that he had tried to kill himself, like in a fit of depression.
Oh, wow.
It was after this that he just simply vanished one day in April 1947. And so there was a period of 19 months where he was literally just AWOL. Like, what he was doing in this time is a complete mystery. But of course, as we know, in November 1948, he turns up dead on Somerton Beach. Eventually, though, in 1951, Dorothy files for divorce, citing that he'd basically just deserted her. She eventually dies, never knowing what had actually happened to him.
Oh, wow, that's quite sad then.
It's so sad.
Yeah, like, would she continued looking for him and stuff like that? So he was depressed on his own for almost 2 years. But then how did he die?
Well, that's the thing. We don't know. We still don't know that.
Hey, you promised answers.
I promised answers about who he was. So it's really incredible how this fancy and mystery of who he was took a whole different direction to what it actually was. From a strange, heartbroken man who was rejected by his lover to being a full-blown spy. And all this was down to the climate of the time that the story had unfolded. Remember, the war had just ended. The world had just entered into the Cold War, in which Australia, amazingly, played a really pivotal part. The idea of communist spies being all over the country, it's not difficult to see how these fantasies and these mysteries of who he was would end up navigating the story down those paths.
Okay, so there's a bit of a bias or conscious bias in people's minds about what's happening at the time. That still doesn't explain the writing in the book, the connection to Justine, and the micro handwriting.
Doesn't.
Do we have answers for that? Do we definitely know he's Carl Charles Webb.
Well, I mean, this is one of the reasons why the story still has all these conspiracy theories around, right? Because it doesn't definitively answer those questions.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, right? Even though we can likely say the story of the Somerton Man has been finally cracked, it doesn't seem like the world is ready to accept this mundane explanation of who he is, because it categorically does not answer some of those other enduring questions. For instance, why was Jessica's phone number in her copy of her book? Why was she so agitated on seeing the plaster cast? What was this code all about? But also the micro writing likely linking to military aircrafts being tested in Woomera 300 miles away. But also, if you go further, it's just so incredibly unlikely that Carl Webb, the Somerton Man, and Robin, and by extension Rachel, all share the same very rare combination of genetic markers. So much so that it has, like I said, spurred other conspiracy theories. Was this basically a cover-up? Because Paul Orson, he is the guy who created the original plaster cast of the Somerton Man. He basically says, that's not the Somerton Man's skull.
What?
Yeah. He believes it was tampered with, potentially even being swapped out, basically to prevent his true identity from being revealed. That's what he is saying. And I think a lot of people would subscribe to that because it doesn't answer those really crucial questions. He holds firm on this notion that the Somerton Man was a spy. And so many people still get that.
Or could this Carl Charles Webb became a spy? Or like he was depressed, but you said he was an engineer. Could he have been working for the Air Force or whatever because of, I don't know, for this Venom plane or something like that? Maybe there is still a connection there, but it is still top secret.
It could be, possibly. I mean, that book itself, right? The Rubaiyat being used to pass on spy messages, seems like that is the case because it just seems so bizarre in the story. But also, Adam, I don't have the answers for you on that. Like, we can keep speculating, but we don't have the answers. Definitively, the DNA has shown that he is this Carl Webb guy. And the suitcase itself, remember, did have a few of the things that an engineer might have, and that was the drafting pencils that an engineer might use.
Yeah, that's true.
And like his brother-in-law was this T. Keen guy.
So maybe his identity is still correct.
Consider this as well. The Rubaiyat was a very popular book at the time. It did a lot of the rounds. And so is it that unusual for multiple people to have that same copy of the book? At the same time, could it be that code was just used by someone to try and solve a crossword in the Sunday puzzle? Could it be that the police, considering the climate of the time, the weirdness around this case, that they looked at Justine's behavior and they read into it a bit too much, and that became fundamental to the lore of the story?
And is the micro handwriting actually micro handwriting and we're looking at something that's not actually there?
Yeah, could it be that it's not there? Yeah.
Ugh.
But I do also wonder how Derek feels in this moment, right?
Well,
this is clearly not the answer he was searching for.
Yeah, he just got married to Rachel.
For nothing!
Yeah.
Although, there is still satisfaction in getting to the bottom of it. I guess, in a way, there's a consolation prize there. The Somerton Man, however, was not Rachel's grandfather. But I think a big portion of his life, 15 years at least, he probably got used to the idea that the Somerton Man was his wife's relative. So I guess there must be a degree of disappointment there.
Yeah, and I guess at this point he's married her now.
Yeah. Got 3 kids, can't abandon them now.
Yeah.
Like the Somerton Man did.
I've grown quite fond of her.
However, there is a more positive note. The news of the Somerton Man being Carl Webb does bring some closure to his actual family. At least they now know what happened to him. It's a small consolation, but in the process, they are, in a nice way, now connected to one of the most enduring stories of like the last 100 years, right? So that is pretty cool. Carl Webb's great-great-grandnephew and niece, Stuart and Christy Webb, they always knew about this family member who suddenly disappeared. They were shown photos of him growing up. So now to finally have a resolution, like that's a big thing for the family. Sadly, though, for them, he wasn't a cool kind of secret spy or a secret agent. There was no secret code, and probably the weird circumstances around Jessica Thomson was, like I said, maybe a situation where the cops were kind of just fishing for an explanation in a place where maybe there just wasn't one. The reality was that Carl Webb was just a regular person. He was troubled, he was flawed, who ended up in an unfortunate situation.
And maybe just died of natural causes that we couldn't identify back then.
Yeah, possibly. Strange. And Adam, that is the story of the Somerton Man.
You built this up to be such an amazing story. We'll find out. And you know what? I've been left feeling disappointed.
Okay, but the thing is, though, we do have a solution. But wouldn't you agree they're getting to this, no matter how mundane it was really cool. What a crazy story.
The journey was fascinating.
Yes.
The ending was like the end of a trilogy or something.
But it is true. Like, not every great mystery needs a dramatic ta-da. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes it's the simplest explanation. Like I said at the very beginning.
Yeah, it's pretty wild how there was like, I guess, all this conspiracy. I guess to be honest, if Derek wasn't still investigating this, we still would be none the wiser, right?
Yeah, that's true. It would still be an enduring story,
so
which I think I would be happy with.
Yeah, I blame Derek.
Him and his proposing after one day. Who does that?
Yeah.
Do you fancy doing some shout-outs?
Let's do it. So this is the part of the show where we remind you that the Compendium is not just a podcast. It is, for reasons that remain legally and spiritually unclear, a regulated place of work. We're a circus who is hiring.
Yes, so guys, make sure you head over to the Compendium podcast or click the link in the show notes. You can browse our growing collection of bizarre circus roles, which you can apply for and tell us exactly what your day-to-day position entails.
Yes, and we want the details. We want exactly what your role involves, what are your duties, what incidents have you had to deal with, who's underperforming, all your KPIs, all that sort of stuff.
This week's standout performance review is from Martin No Claims Puddyfoot. Is that his name?
No claims.
I think he's put that in brackets.
Okay.
Yeah. Martin No Claims Puddyfoot, who is our stilt insurance underwriter.
Okay, yeah.
He basically assesses acceptable wobbles, prices stilts based on ambition,
Yeah.
and denies claims caused by dramatic dismounts or confidence beyond policy limits.
I see.
He conducts on-site wobble audits, reviews gravity incidents, and issues coverage with suspiciously specific exclusions. He's required to remain calm while someone explains that they weren't even doing anything from very high up.
He says that he checks all stilt claims properly, including height, wobble, weather conditions, and whether the person involved had recently said, "Nah, I'll be fine." Because statistics show they never will be.
It's true.
He's got strong experience in this area because his cousin Dean once tried stilts at a village fete and fell directly into the tombola. He won a bottle of Advoca but lost all trust in pavement. Watching his shameful and frankly embarrassing calamity, that, to be fair, I saw coming, makes him feel like he's the best person for the job.
Wow.
And so last week, he rejected a claim from a clown man who said his stilts betrayed him. And reviewing the evidence, it turned out he had tried to moonwalk on gravel. Don't do that.
Yeah.
The claim has been denied, and once again, all culpability towards the compendium was absolved. Another win.
Oh, good.
He's also investigated a clown who fell into a buffet and claimed emotional damage. Again, to protect the compendium, we managed to bribe that buffet to ensure a counterclaim.
The buffet issued a counterclaim.
What?
The buffet would like to sue in response.
The devil X, he managed to have a conversation with them. How, he says, we promised to never disrespect the buffet by allowing guests to plate up using Hello Kitty paper plates.
Oh,
ever
okay.
again.
Yeah. God, that is disrespectful. You can't have like a marvelous buffet and like dish it up on a cut of kitty plate.
And then for his KPI assessment, he says that he remains calm, fair, and only slightly scared of tall people, which is not to say that is the reason why he rejects so many claims, but he's also saying that it's not the reason that he says, I feel I have my fear of the tall well and truly controlled, and the likelihood of saying that's not covered, mate, is extremely high, which has saved the compendium a fortune in payouts. So for that, he says he wants a raise and a kazoo. All these people that want kazoos.
Maybe that should be the next thing that we send out as merch.
Yeah.
Get some compendium kazoos.
Let's look into it.
Let's do it. It was good. So guys, if you want to be featured in a future episode, head over to the Compendium Podcast, click jobs in the footer or click jobs in the show notes. Pick your role and send us your application. We will read the best one on a future episode.
And now, shall we run the outro?
I'm ready for the outro, yeah. And so that brings us to the end of another fascinating foray into the Compendium, an assembly of fascinating things. We hope you enjoyed the ride as much as we did.
And if today's episode has sparked your curiosity, then please do us a favor and follow us on your favorite podcast app. It truly makes a world of difference and helps more people discover the show.
And for our dedicated freaks out there, don't forget that next week's episode is already waiting for you on our Patreon. And as always, it is completely free to access.
And if you want even more, then you can join our Certified Freaks tier to unlock the entire archive, delve into exclusive content, and get a sneak peek at what's coming next.
We drop new episodes every Tuesday, and until then, remember, Adam, not every mystery gets a grand reveal.
It should do, though.
See you next time.
See ya.
This is the story of the one who keeps multiple buildings running smoothly day after day. Plumbing that flows, HVAC that hums, cleaning supplies that keep surfaces sparkling. That's why she counts on Grainger. With easy reordering online and 24/7 support, Grainger helps her keep the products she needs on hand. So shelves stay stocked and buildings stay ready. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.